Awesome. So we are broadcasting. We're going to give it a few minutes for our attendees to join. And while we do that, I'm going to go ahead and start the Facebook Live as well. But thank you to everyone who's joining. This is the Central Valley Scholars Transfer Experience webinar. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and start we're going to give it a couple minutes for people to join. We might start at 4:05 or a little bit earlier if we see that, folks seem to be comfortable on the Zoom already and everyone is signed in. Awesome. Thank you so far to everyone who's joined. In case someone joined a little bit later after I started explaining, I'll put this in the chat as well. We're setting up the Facebook Live, so if you know anyone who might be interested in watching the webinar through there as well, we're happy to have that resource for y'all if it's easier to get to than Zoom. And the recording will also be up there as well as on our website, hopefully, within this following week. Yeah. So I just sent a little message in the chat to let everyone know we're starting in a few minutes. Alrighty, awesome. So I see a couple more people have joined us on the Zoom. Thank y'all so much for being here this afternoon. Thank you for sharing your Saturdays with us and coming to get this awesome information from our presenters, Claudia and Angie. My name is Katia. I'm the events coordinator for Central Valley Scholars. And for those of y'all who just joined, I'll go ahead and start going over some of the Zoom logistics for today for all of our attendees. Thank you all again for being here. At this point, I'm sure you've probably noticed that everyone except for our panelists, everyone's camera and audio will be off for, until the remainder of until the end of this webinar. So you don't have to worry about, whether or not we can hear you or see you, because we can't, just to make sure that we keep your information private. And for the same reasons, we've disabled the chat for this webinar, but you can still communicate with us, and we encourage you to communicate with us through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. It'll be on the little dark bar next to on the bottom of your screen. It'll say Q&A and have little talking bubbles. If you open it up, you can put all your questions in there. We encourage you to drop your questions as they come up so that we can get an idea of how many questions we have and maybe try to start thinking up of some answers during the presentation. We'll be addressing all the questions at the end, so please feel free to drop them in as they come up, and we'll get around to them at the end. And yeah, so that's the main thing you need to know. You also, can drop any comments for us if you have any, anything you want to tell our presenters, anything you want to tell me. If at some point our audio or cameras is not working and you just can't see the slides, let us know of that. That'll be the main way that we communicate with one another. But it is 4:05, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, here we actually give me just a second. Okay, awesome. Alrighty, and then Claudia and Angie, go ahead and let me know if you can see everything and everything is looking good. Awesome. Okay, here we go. So again, thank you everyone for being here. This is the Let's Get Real Transfer Edition webinar with Central Valley Scholars and presented by Claudia Fabian, pronouns she, her, ella, and Angie Solis, also she, her, ella pronouns. And yeah, so before we get into the webinar, I just want to talk a little bit about Central Valley Scholars for people who may not be so familiar with our organization, or maybe this is your first time attending any of our programs. Just so that y'all know, we do these public webinars, but in addition to that, we also are serving the Central Valley community through one-on-one mentorship programs that provide, like hand-holding sort of guidance through college apps, FAFSA, and different financial aid applications. We also offer different, a number of different scholarships. This past year, we offered, 3 $1,000 scholarships, and we've just been adding to that since. So we're really excited to announce scholarships for next year. So definitely look out for those. We have an LGBTQ scholarship, a first-generation scholarship, an undocumented scholarship, and many more to come. So definitely, sign up for our newsletter at centralvalleyscholars.org so that you can stay updated with all the information and new programs that we're hoping to produce. And again, yeah, Central Valley Scholars is run pretty much entirely by Central Valley youth who are currently in their undergrad and are hoping to, give back to our community and provide students with the resources they need to pursue higher education. And yeah, so to learn more about our upcoming public services, visit centralvalleyscholars.org/workshops. We actually have our final workshop so far for this year is going to be on November 28th, next Saturday, same time. Well, it'll be from 4 to 6, so a little bit longer. And it's going to provide one-on-one assistance with answering your personal insight questions. Seeing as how the UC application is due on the 30th, it's more like last minute help, but I think it's just as important to, make sure some, new eyes are looking at your essays before you submit. Come if you're interested in getting just some quick one-on-one help and some fast feedback before you submit. We'd love to help you all out with that. And I can send the links for that as well at the end of the presentation. One final thing I want to do with everyone is go ahead and dive into this land acknowledgement. So I encourage you, Angie and Claudia, and everyone who's attending, you're welcome to, our attendees already have cameras off, but you can, feel free to close your eyes, plant your feet on the ground, and just take a few deep breaths as I read off this land acknowledgement. So I want to first, take a moment to acknowledge where we're at, the earth below our feet, and the earth below our feet and below our homes is Indigenous territory. It has belonged to and been tended to by Indigenous people for hundreds and thousands of years. When white settlers arrived to what we otherwise know as the United States, they enacted genocide and theft of the land, labor, and resources, attempting to wipe out Indigenous communities entirely. And it's important to acknowledge the land we're on and to recognize our history and relationship to the ongoing legacy of colonization in the US, and to also recognize that the Indigenous peoples are still here and their resistance and resilience are still on the front lines, struggling for land rights, collective liberation, and an end to white supremacy. I invite you to take a moment to think about your relationship to this land and its history, and let those who have come before us in the struggle inform us on where we're going, so that together we can reimagine and collectively build a world where we're all free. Thank you all so much for participating in that. This land acknowledgement, we keep it fairly general because we understand that in sort of this virtual platform, everyone is in different spaces, but I do want to just put out there that where I'm from, in Fresno County in the Central Valley, and most of the Central Valley is on Yokutt territory. And because I'm sharing screen right now, I'll just save these links for the end. But I'll be sending everyone, some additional resources on what land acknowledgements are and how you can find out which Indigenous territory you're on. But with that being said, that's all I have for you all. I'll be sharing screen, but I'm gonna mute myself. I'll also try to help manage the Q&A box, but yeah, go ahead, Angie and Claudia, I'll hand it off to both of you.
Thank you, Katia. So hi, everyone. My name is Claudia Fabian. I go by she, her pronouns. I am a De Anza College alumni. I am a current UC Berkeley senior studying sociology. And after graduating, I hope to pursue a career in education. So yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Angie. I use the she series or ella. I am an alumni from Pasadena City College down in SoCal, currently an undergrad studying sociology with a minor in education, and I hope to pursue higher education, specifically in like community college or four-year. You can go to the next slide, Katya.
All right, so the goals of this presentation is to, oops, can you go back?
Sorry, give me a second for the little thing to load. Hold on. There we go.
All right, so the goals of this presentation is to provide insight for college students who are currently enrolled in community college or are thinking about going to a community college before an undergraduate university.
Yeah, it's also to provide information for college students who are currently enrolled in community college or are thinking about going to community college before an undergraduate university.
You can go ahead to the next slide, Katya. All right, so what is a transfer student? It is a normal college student, and I mean normal because a lot of the times people have this stigma about community college students, but we are normal college students who are doing the same amount of work and just simply taking a simpler route. Like I mentioned, society holds a negative stigma that's saying, you know, they may not graduate, but Angie and I are proof that it is possible to graduate and to also get into the school of your dreams that you like. It's just a myth. And so also in many community colleges, you're being taught by university professors. So at De Anza, I had the pleasure of working with professors that worked in Stanford, for instance, as well as San Jose State or Santa Clara University. And I was not paying, you know, thousands of dollars. In fact, I was paying way below that. So that's just something to think about. And yeah, Angie, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so my community college is actually the #1 community college in transferring. So that's also a plus. I also didn't pay anything for community college because I got the BOG waiver, which if you have questions, I mean, you can always send that in the chat. That's a way cheaper route. Wouldn't say that it's easier necessarily, but it's definitely an alternative, especially if you're not sure if like what you want to do in the future. Definitely recommend community college.
Also, quickly adding to that, I think it prepares you very well into your university that you want to get into. As far as like for me personally, going into Cal, it was an easier transition. Whereas if I was coming from high school to Cal, I feel that it would have been much more harder for me to assimilate to that culture.
Yeah, 100% agree. I graduated high school at 17 and had no clue what I was going to do. So yeah, we can move right into the next slide. So why we chose our community college. So I chose my community college. So I'm originally from East LA, which is not close to Pasadena City. So we chose to travel to a top community college, which is top in like transferring. So I had to travel an hour and an hour and a half by bus just so that I can get a better education because the community college where I was at didn't offer a lot of the resources. But this also doesn't have to be you. If there is one community college closer to you, if there's two, choose between the two, make it the best of your experience because ultimately it's you who is gaining all your how do I say it? Like your resources, you're the one that's getting all the information for you to transfer. It's not impossible. However, right now everything's online. Join any community college right now that it's online. But that's the reason why I chose to go a little bit further out. I had a community college that was about 3 blocks from where I live, and because it didn't have the resources that I needed, or because I also didn't want to get that high school experience again, where I would be able to see the same faces over and over again. I didn't want to fall into the same track that I did back in high school. Not that I was a bad student, but I just wanted to open myself up to more like a bigger network. Claudia, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, yeah. So I'm from the Silicon Valley, from San Jose, much more specifically. And so I went to De Anza Community College, which is in Cupertino. So that itself is a commute there. But I also did it because it's tops in transfer, because I also had the choice of going to San Jose City College, which is not that far from me. But again, because of the resources and the reputation it held, because I feel like now it's changed. But I think also if you do decide to go to your local community college that's like closer to you, I would highly suggest you to go to your professor's office hours and build relationships with them, because by you creating that, and if your community college lacks some types of resources, they could expose you to things of your interest and mentor you, guide you into transferring.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody that this doesn't have to be you. I chose to travel, Claudia chose to travel. But if this is not something that you wish to do or it's not at your disposal, please by all means make the best of your experience at community college, because this is ultimately your future. We could go into the next slide as well.
Okay. All right. So the benefits of community college is that it's low cost. The first 2 years are now free if you're in California and if you are a US citizen. And then you have a second opportunity to go into the universities that you love. In fact, universities tend to accept more students that are transfer students into their university. So that's definitely something I would consider. And then meeting professors, you're actually going to be able to interact with them. They'll actually be able to know your name. You can go to office hours. It'll be more accessible for you, as well as making more connections, whether that's with students, faculty, staff, professors, and educators outside of institutions. Like Angie said, it's a very diverse form of like networking that you could definitely do there. And then figuring out your major. I personally took about 4 years to actually transfer, because it was hard as a first gen. It's very hard to decide on what you want to do for the rest of your life, because that's the pressure. You're like, once you declare your major in something, that's what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And that's not always the case. But I had that along with me the whole time. And so I was like, I don't know what to be, because I think that there's no second chances, or like having that mindset. But yeah, so it allowed me to figure out my major by getting involved, going to professors' office hours and so forth. But most importantly, I did not feel bad in that time, because I didn't have to spend any money. Whereas if I was at university, I'd be thinking, wow, I'm really out here spending thousands of dollars for another year. And then potentially more financial aid help. So there is Pell Grant, BOC fee waiver, and community college scholarships. When you transfer, they have, depending on the community college that you go to, but I know that, for instance, like De Anza, I was luckily able to get like 3 to 5 scholarships. And so that helped me when transferring to UC Berkeley. So I didn't really have to pay out of pocket. Where I've noticed that when you're going from high school to a university, it's really hard to find scholarships, but also you have Central Valley scholars too, if you are interested in a scholarship. Angie, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so everybody that I've talked to, every staff member that I've talked to at my university has talked about how great transfer students are. We're probably the most dedicated and the most go-getters, because we've already figured out what we want. And so that's another benefit. You can take as much time as you like at community college if that's what you want to do. If you're not sure what you want to do, also an option for you to stay there. I was at community college as well for about, I think I was there for 3.5 years trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Changed my major like 3 times until finally I decided on sociology. Meeting professors probably was the biggest impact in my life. If it wasn't for the professors that I met in community college, I honestly probably wouldn't have gotten into where I went into. They were the ones who were reviewing my PIQs. They were the ones who were writing my letters of rec. It's definitely a smaller setting than going straight to a university. So, and you get to keep these connections like even after you graduate community college. I can go back to community college and I can talk to those professors that I had and they'll still remember. And so honestly, probably the main choice, I'm also a reentry student. So that was like a second opportunity for me to be where I wanted to be. I was working in sales and I didn't like it. I was making good money, but it wasn't getting me anywhere. So the fact that I had community college to fall back on was something that I really, really, really like. I can't express how much I'm thankful for that. I don't think I would want to be working in Hollywood, which is where I was working at, for the rest of my life. So Even if you think that maybe right now is that community college is not an option for you, community college is always going to be there, and it's always going to be an option. We can move on to the next slide. So the way that most of us prepared, but I'm going to speak on my experience, prepared to transfer was I kept in close contact with my counselors for my community college. I set up a graduation plan and a transfer plan. The IGETC, if you all are familiar, if you are all a community college student, IGETC is basically the criteria that you have to meet in order to graduate and transfer to a four-year university, specifically UCs. Also covers some CSUs. But there's another criteria if you're only specifically looking for CSUs. Also used assist.org. Assist.org is a site that helps students with updated classes that they may need or that are required for example, for sociology, I needed to, there was a requirement of 3 classes. In order to know what classes I needed to log into assist.org. Claudia, do you want to log into assist.org real quick, or should we do that at the end?
Yeah, we could go on to assist.org now. Kati, do you want to do it, or do you want me to screen share?
Yeah, I was gonna say I can open it up right now. Let me stop sharing, and then you share your screen and then kind of show everyone what it looks like, how to input things.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is assist.org. And so we're in the academic year of 2021. So you would choose a community college that you're at. So I'm just gonna put De Anza. And then you're gonna choose the institution that you want to get into. So let's do Berkeley. Doesn't have to be Berkeley. And then you would choose the major that you're interested in. So let's just say you're into computer science. Let me move this real quick. So then you would view the agreement, if I'm not mistaken. And then right here, it tells you what requirements you have to, what classes you have to take in order to get into UC Berkeley, or the requirements that UC Berkeley is asking for. So it tells you, for instance, here, you have to take computer science 61. Whereas I think you here, for math, you could do either, you would have to do math 1A and 1B, or you would do math 1A honors, math 1B honors. And so it just kind of gives you a frame of what you have to do on top of your IGETC or your, what's the other one called? I'm blanking out.
The CSU requirements.
Yes.
So this is for your major requirements. So on one side, it'll have the school's class name, and on the other side, it'll have your school's or your community college class names. And so you would cross-reference that to make sure that you're fulfilling the requirement.
Yes. Does anybody by any chance want us to go into a specific major and university with them?
If you do, you can drop it in the chat or in the Q&A.
Yes, I also will just make the quick announcement that we sent the assist.org link in the chat as well, in case, maybe you're not sure what you want to look up yet, but you think it's a good resource. I think it's definitely worth bookmarking. I think it's helpful just for everyone to have. Sometimes though, one thing I'll note is that the academic years, or sometimes things aren't exactly fully up to date. Sometimes you'll get the notification of what's it called? They don't have the most updated list of classes. Okay, so someone just asked in the chat if we could do MJC to UC Merced.
MJC. What's the full name of that one?
So if whoever put that one in the chat, if you could just follow up and give us the full name, what MJC is.
What school was it?
Okay, so Modesto Junior College.
Okay, here it is. Okay. And then what was it? Merced. Okay. Thank you, Angie. And what is the major that you're interested in focusing on?
To that first person. Criminal justice.
Okay, let me, oops. It might not be under criminal justice. Let me quickly look here. Maybe administrative? No.
So sometimes with assist, according to your community college, it'll ask for a different or a similar major so that you can fulfill that major. So criminal justice, I don't know if it's on there, but maybe like legal studies maybe will be on there, or
Yeah, that's what I was also looking it under, but it's, no, it doesn't. Let me write it out. No. Let's see.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, I think definitely in the times I've used assist, it's sometimes interesting in that like things aren't exactly named the same things. Cause again, we're dealing with like cross institutions, like they don't all call things all the same thing, or maybe they don't offer certain majors. So sometimes it requires a little bit of additional research. But if we can't find that one, I think that one, there's other ways to just find other lists of classes. Like if you have a specific class in mind that you want to see if it transfers, that can sometimes be helpful as well. But if we have time and if y'all want to now, someone else asked if we could, okay, well this isn't, so someone asked if we can enter Modesto High School to UC Berkeley for lawyers.
I don't know if it works on high schools. I think this is just for community colleges.
yeah, it's only for community college.
Yeah, so yeah, well, thank you. That's helpful too for clarifying for how to use it. But yeah, so if anyone else has similar situations they want to maybe experiment with assist, put them in the chat or just, feel free to explore it.
Yeah, I still have it pulled up on here. So if you guys want, we could definitely check it out if you still want to put it on the chat. But yeah, I definitely encourage to check out assist.org. That was like on my bookmark while in community college, because you also don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, meaning that you don't want to just apply to one university. So I was like, okay, I'm thinking of like UC Davis. So I'm going to check what UC Davis is asking for. I'm going to check what San Jose State's asking for. So that's always a good resource. So you have to like make sure that, you're fulfilling each school of your choice to transfer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something that I referred back to. A lot of the schools require the same classes as well. So for example, if there's a class that's required for UC Berkeley, but it's also required for Merced, you don't need to take the class twice. You've already fulfilled it if you've taken it. And that can also be the same thing for CSUs. So something else that helped prepare to transfer was actually being involved in extracurricular activities. This can help with your application. It can show dedication. You can also include like jobs and committees that you've been on or commitments. So for example, I know somebody who applied and they actually babysat, and they would be a translator for their grandparents and a translator for their sister. So because of that, that's also showing how dedicated you are to keeping connected with like professionals in your life and stuff like that, and even with your family. It shows that you're doing something outside of just school, which shows dedication, commitment, as I mentioned. Also, if you're at capacity, or if since schools is now online, like you can also talk to representatives. I'm sure that if your school has a transfer center, I'm sure all community colleges do. You can talk to a representative. You can even talk to an admissions officer if you were to go onto the school's website, and you can talk to an admissions officer. This will help clarify a lot of questions that you may have. It can help with programs that are available. For example, only specifically talking about UC Berkeley, because that's where I attend. You can talk about the TAP program. You can talk about CCCP, which is also available for UCLA. The tag program is for UCs. Basically, you can tag a UC. You have to meet all the requirements by a certain time, and you will be it's a transfer admissions guarantee. So you would have a admission guarantee to that school if you follow that criteria by a certain time for when you apply. UC Berkeley also has Starting Point Mentorship. So that is a program where matches current undergrad students at UC Berkeley with current community college students in California, to help them transition into a 4-year, and to help with like PIQs, with different questions that they have, not specifically just to Berkeley, but it is ran by UC Berkeley students, but they can help with any school. Also, if you're at capacity, I know that we are in a pandemic right now and it's probably not the best thing to do, but if you're at capacity of visiting a school, for me, it was a feel that I had when I went to Berkeley. It definitely was about like the programs and stuff like that, and it is like a top university. But I didn't feel that, and so is UCLA. But I didn't have that feeling of this is where I want to be, this is where I belong, like I did at Berkeley. Claudia, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so really quickly going back to being involved, that is something I highly suggest for if you can, if you're at capacity to get involved. I know we're online, as Angie mentioned, because we're in a pandemic, but try to go on your school's website, see like what clubs are happening, or like just try to get yourself involved in there. Because for me personally, by getting involved, I was able to to create close relationships with other scholars in my community college, which honestly helped me as an individual grow, but also as a leader gain leadership skills, helped my communication skills as well. And so all of that will help you in your personal question statements. So I just suggest for you to do that, as well as like by you getting involved, you're kind of essentially getting your name out there and people will know of you and stuff like that. So when it comes to like getting a letter of recommendation, you could definitely always go back for that. As well as clubs, for instance, tend to have like a professor who administrates it. So then you could create some like close relationship with them. And then when your personal statements time is occurring, you can go back to them and ask them like, hey, can you revise my PIQ and stuff like that. They could just simply become your mentor or advisor. And then for sure, visiting the school, I highly suggest you to do that, because yes, the school may be a really great institution, but if you don't feel it, it might be really hard to spend those 2 years that you're gonna have there if you genuinely don't like the feel for it. So yeah, I definitely suggest you checking it out, whether you're like virtual, like on virtual tours, even though it won't be the same, or physically going to the campus, as well as also checking in with other scholars if you can, that are students at that university, to see how it really is.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, if you're involved, it's a lot easier, or it can help spruce up your resume when you're trying to get an internship, when you're trying to get involved with research and stuff like that on campus once you transfer. It gives you a lot of experience, even though you are volunteering, even though you're just dedicating your time to specific extracurricular activities. And there are extracurricular activities in which you want to like get an internship for and stuff like that. It can also help with that. We can jump into the next slide as well.
All right, so how do we prepare to transfer? Definitely by making a pros and cons list for each school that you could like pull out a Google spreadsheet. And the pros and cons could vary from like how much it costs to like, you know, how much you're gonna like spend in food, the books, tuition, like traveling and all that sorts of things. Like if you're, let's just say for instance, like a homebody and your school is like 5 hours away, really think about it. Like, is this going to be good for my own mental health or not? That's part of like the pros and cons. And like the pro could be like, for instance, like UC Berkeley, it's the #1 public institution in the world. And then like the rest could be like what you're worried about. And then brainstorm PIQs as early as you can. I think they release them like 2 months before, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely get on it like as soon as you can. Start brainstorming. Don't wait until the last minute, because if one thing that I've learned is that you should not just write it up and submit it. You should write it up, get it proofread, have others read it, get feedback on it. And that all comes in time, right? Like we can't just be like, I'm going to submit it to like 2 people, assuming that they have time for us. You want to give them time, like a 2-week span, if possible, at least 1 week. So definitely do that if you can. And then review, as I was saying, put in as much effort as you can. Be your authentic self when you're writing this, your personal statements. It could be hard to open up to people because you don't know who's going to read it. But at the end of the day, sadly, we're kind of selling our story. So be as real and raw as you can, and trust people that, and share it to people that you genuinely trust. And again, it's not about the grades. It's about who you are, about the things that you've done in the community, or what you've done overall for yourself and others. Universities love to hear of like what work you do. So, yes, a 4.0 is good, but they also, if you have like a 3.5, and which is not bad, it's good. And you're out here doing other extracurricular activities, that's what they want to see, and you're out here persevering, that's what universities want. And let's see, and then as I mentioned, do not put all your eggs in one basket. Don't risk it, choose different variety of schools. You could do the tag program that Angie had mentioned earlier, as well as applying to other universities, whether that's UCs and CSUs or privates. Definitely apply, because it doesn't hurt to apply. And one thing that I also want to say is that if you feel like you don't belong in that institution and that's what's stopping you from applying, don't, actually apply. Because I didn't think that I was going to get into UC Berkeley, and I was not about to apply, but my mentor told me, just apply. It doesn't hurt to apply. So that is one thing you should keep in mind, that you belong in these spaces. So apply. Angie, do you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, I just want to jump back to PIQs. So I've actually worked for the undergrad admissions for a little bit. I would speak to undergrad admissions officers a lot. Something that they told me was, if you're comfortable, if you're not comfortable sharing your personal statement out loud, then that's a good personal statement. Unfortunately, a lot of the times we have to relive our trauma for someone to understand us. And that's just the reality for a lot of these schools that are asking for PIQs. But that was something that I've always carried with me. If I feel uncomfortable sharing my story, it's because it's affected you and helped you grow in some way. And it's definitely something that the universities want to look at. Definitely want to see how much you've grown from that. So a fun fact, I transferred to UC Berkeley with a 3.2, but I did not feel comfortable sharing my personal statement. I only shared it with one professor, and one professor has only ever seen that personal statement, and they reviewed it 5 times before I submitted. A lot of these personal insight questions sometimes don't seem to feel like they get too deep, but go as deep as you want, go as deep as you can. Unfortunately, I had to relive my trauma when writing these personal statements. Might be the case for you all, but if this is something that helped me, was that I've grown through this, I've gone past this, and I'm going to get through this. It's something that I just kept reminding myself of. I know that it's probably hard, and probably some of you are writing your personal statements right now, and probably getting emotional, and that's completely okay. But I would advise you to have someone who you trust, like Claudia mentioned, to review your personal statement and review. Put your eggs don't put your eggs all in one basket. So by that, so California, for certain, if like your income is under a certain amount, you get a waiver where you can apply to 4 UCs and 4 Cal States for free, if you wish. However, private universities, that's not the case. Out of state universities, that's not the case. So sometimes if you decide to go to community college, you can create these relationships with professors and with faculty who are willing to sponsor you so that you can apply to these different institutions. I had a professor who was willing to sponsor me to apply to NYU. Unfortunately, I didn't apply, but fortunate enough, I didn't want to go there anyway. So definitely something to spend your time on, definitely something to think about, and we can move on to the next slide. So the truth about being a transfer student at the university level. So this is something that rarely gets talked about. And it's okay if you didn't get accepted into your top choice. Things happen for a reason. And if you do, so let's say you get into your top university, but then another university comes along and you are stuck, and you are stuck because this is your top choice and they're offering you something better at a different university. It's okay to not choose your top choice. It's okay to not go where you originally thought you were going to go. It's okay to question whether you should go to your top choice or whether you should go to somewhere where they're offering you something better. It's okay. That's something that happened to me. So my top choice was UC Berkeley, but I got a better offer at UCLA. I ultimately chose Berkeley because it was again that feeling of what felt right. But I spent a long time. I SIR'd, or I accepted Berkeley the day that it was due. So the day that I had to SIR, the final day is when I accepted, because I had so much. I did a pros and cons list. I wrote out everything that I needed to write out. I needed to put everything out there. I talked to my family, I talked to my brother, and I was like, you know what, I don't know what to do. I was going to leave UCLA debt free, but I was going to be in debt at UC Berkeley. And I didn't care because that's what I wanted. A lot of the times this is not the ideal situation. Many times you will probably choose something that is more economical, and that's completely okay too. But I also want to remind you that you're investing in your future, just like you would invest in a car. You're investing in your future. No one can, you can get your car repoed, you can get your house taken away, but nobody can take your knowledge. So I always remind myself of that. Also, be realistic with your situation. So if like, for example, if that was the situation with you, that you weren't going to go, you weren't going to have debt, and two, you were going to be in debt, really have this conversation with yourself, but also remind yourself, and I will say this over and over and over again, you're investing in yourself and in your future. Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is something that I still suffer from. It definitely, it doesn't affect me as much as it did before. My first semester, when I transferred, it was probably the hardest. I was in an institution that was not built for somebody like me. It was not built for a woman, and it was not built for a woman of color. And I definitely felt like an outsider. I felt like my voice wasn't being heard. Sometimes I would have people talk over me. I'm from a low income community, very low income community. And so I really didn't fit in with these UC Berkeley students. It took about a month and a half or a month to really like get over this imposter syndrome. Still go through it now. I still sometimes think like I don't even know how I got in here, because I honestly don't. I honestly sometimes think that like, when are they gonna just pull my application? Because sometimes like, it's things that I continuously question. And that's a big thing with transfer students. A lot of the times transfer students feel alone because of that. But the transfer students are also the most diverse students on campus and the most dedicated. So I always remind myself of that. Claudia, do you want to jump in about talking about imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. In fact, when I got into UC Berkeley, I did not tell anybody, just my close family, because again, I thought they were going to revoke my admissions. And so I didn't fully share that I'm going to UC Berkeley until like once I registered to class. And even then, yet, I still felt like maybe they might revoke it because I don't belong in this space. So it's normal to feel this way. And you do belong in these spaces. They chose you for a reason. So it's easier said that, you know, we belong in these spaces than actually like believing it. But do your best as much as you can to just remind yourself that you've worked so hard to get to the place that you've gotten into. So as also like finding community is definitely one thing that helped me, and finding friends also helps me with making myself feel like this is real, because again, I was just like, I feel out of place. And so by, you know, for instance, like UC Berkeley has a multicultural center. By me going in there, I felt like, okay, I do belong here, and I checked out the resources and stuff like that. So checking out resources can also help with that like imposter syndrome, because there's tools that people can help you with or give you so that you could also work on it individually for yourself. And yeah, it's okay if you don't get accepted into your top university, because I think things happen for a reason. For instance, me, like I didn't think that I was ever going to get into UC Berkeley, and I never had it in plan for this to happen. But I think things that happen in my life led me through this way. So it's okay if you don't get into that school. If you go into another school, maybe that school had something better for you in the long run. And so just a reminder of that, everything it plays out in your own, for your own good.
Yeah, definitely. I know that assimilating may take some time for some people, and that's completely normal. Sometimes students have trouble finding their community. Sometimes they're not even aware of the different resources that are on campus, where you can find your community. Like the Multicultural Center was not something that I learned until my second semester at Berkeley. The Transfer Center is where I work at now, where most of my community is at. Also, joining clubs is another way to find community. Looking into research, internships, a lot of the times your interest will fall directly into someone else's interest, and that's how you will all become, or how you will find your community. Definitely how I found mine. But just remind yourself that you belong in these spaces and take up space. Don't be afraid to take up space, especially if you're a woman. We can move into the next slide.
100% agree, Angie. All right, so the truth about being a transfer student at a university level. So stress will still happen. Just because you got into the university of your dreams does not mean that you can chill, because it's not the case. Especially as first gen, it's harder for us because we're starting from scratch. We really don't know how to navigate these institutions. So just a reminder that it's normal and it's okay. We will get through it. And then we also learning about resources and use them. As we said previously, I cannot emphasize this enough. Use the resources that are there for you. People pay for these resources to be there, so use them as much as you can. And then work study. That is basically like if you find a job on campus, you could get through your FAFSA, they decide on how much you can get per year. And so, for instance, like for me personally, they give me like up to $4,000, right? So I can work up to that amount. And that could be a job found on campus or internships that are on there. So that's another way that you can gain money. And they tend to be very flexible if you work on campus. Very, very flexible. Like you could even, some people are even like flexible enough that like you could essentially be at the desk, but also like be doing your studying or your reading that you have going on. So I highly suggest you to find a job on campus if you're interested in doing that. If I personally suggest you do that because the more you get involved into the institution, the better it is too for like your resume, as well as like for your career. So definitely get into the institution in one way or another. And then letters of recommendations, they're hard to come by. Like they're harder, I feel, at the university level than community colleges, but go into your GSI's office hours or your professor's office hours. I feel like it's more realistic to talk to your GSIs for many reasons. For me personally, it's because professors tend to be more intimidating at UC Berkeley, or maybe that's just part of my imposter syndrome, where I feel like I can't go in there without being nervous. So I tend to go more with my GSIs. And so it's happened where GSIs they've told us, if you ever guys need a recommendation letter, you would first ask the professor, and then the professor would ask me to write that letter, because they're the ones who are grading your paper. They're the ones who are also teaching you on the side from the lecture halls. So they get to know you more. So that's just my own personal advice, is to go in, create relationships as much as you can. And then double majoring, adding semesters is a possibility, just because, they say you have to be in and out in 2 years. That's not always the case. And I know every university is different, but I know for UC Berkeley, they're pretty flexible on that. So yeah, if you want to double major, go in immediately and like check out what major you want to check out, you want to double major in, as well as like if you want to stay another semester, go in and check that out, see how all of that works. And if like if you would have to pay more money or not. And yeah.
Yeah.
Angie.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about work study. So I currently have a work study job on campus. Prior to this semester, I used to have 3 work study jobs. But like Claudia mentioned, they're super flexible in the sense that I had 3 jobs, but I was only working 15 hours a week. What that means is that I would work like 5 hours in one job, 3 hours in another job, and like 8 hours in another job, right? Or however many hours it was in another job. You cannot go over 19.5 hours if you are on work study. So you will only be working part-time on work study, so you can't go past 19.9 hours a week on work study. Yeah, I think Claudia's face, she's like, wait a minute. So that's per week. You also will get paid whatever the minimum is if wherever you're staying at. Sometimes if it's a much tougher work study position, they'll pay more. Sometimes they'll give you a stipend. Depending on what it is that you are choosing to do your work study on. Unfortunately, work study is not always available to all students. So it's definitely something that you want to look into when you get your financial aid package once you get accepted to a four-year university. Letters of recommendation. So Claudia talked about GSIs. So GSIs are specific to UC Berkeley, which are grad student instructors, which should have them in all other universities. But the reason why we have them at Berkeley is because those GSIs or those grad student instructors are the ones that are doing discussion classes. So sometimes our classes are 200 to 300 students, and our GSIs or the TAs will help facilitate a discussion section where we can have our questions answered, or ask questions about lecture that we didn't understand, or they'll be like the middle person between us and the professor if the class has a question in general. They'll bring it up in class in the following time that we meet. And so those, like Claudia mentioned, you would ask the professor first, and then the GSI will write it for you, because they are the ones that are speaking with you directly or interacting with you directly, and then the professor will sign it off. Double majoring and adding semesters. So depending on the university, I know Claudia already talked about this, but the way that you can double major is to make sure that you already have the major requirements prior to wanting to double major. So at the community college, so let's say you were thinking about sociology and you were thinking about film, right? But you transferred in as a sociology major. They are in the same college. So this can only happen if you're in the same college according to UC Berkeley. This is only specifically for UC Berkeley. Like we mentioned, it depends on the university. You can add another major, so you double major, and then that will automatically add another semester or another year, depending on how many units you have, because there is a unit cap. You can also add semesters if you wish to minor. However, that also depends on the department, and that depends on the college as well. So it's definitely a possibility. I know that when I started Berkeley, I didn't think about education until this past semester, and I will be graduating next semester, but because I added the semester for that minor. So it's definitely a possibility, and we can get into, I think it's the final slide. So the final slide is just a Q&A. If you have any questions for us, definitely list them on the Q&A. Our Instagrams, Claudia's LinkedIn are on there. Central Valley Scholars website, their Instagram, their Facebook, and Twitter are also on there. Claudia, would you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, if you guys ever have any questions within regards to like higher education, feel free to reach us out. You can find us on Instagram, or you can find me on LinkedIn. We can connect through there. I definitely just want to open myself up personally to like help you, just because as a first gen, I definitely know that it's very challenging to navigate these institutions. So I want to be a resource to anybody that needs it. So yeah, I hope that this presentation was helpful, and if you guys have any questions, let us know.
Yeah, I also work at the Transfer Center at UC Berkeley. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. My Instagram is on there. I don't have a LinkedIn, but you could definitely reach out to me Instagram. I can give you my email there. We can chat for a bit. I've definitely worked in different parts of the UC Berkeley campus with different programs as well. So I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the programs at Berkeley. So if you have any questions, also reach out. And thank you for coming out and staying for the whole presentation.
Yeah,
Yes,
thanks. Sorry.
I'm so sorry, Katia. I was just gonna say, yes, definitely use up all your resources. Okay, like I cannot emphasize this enough. Also, ask for help because it never hurts to ask for help. So those are my two big tips: ask for help and use up the resources as much as you can. And yeah, go ahead, Katia.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, thank you all so much for agreeing to co-host this webinar. I'm sure it's going to be a really awesome resource. I'm going to leave this slide up for a little bit longer, so anyone who's attending, feel free to take a screenshot or feel free to also visit the recordings of this, which will be available on our Facebook page, Central Valley Scholars, and also on our website, which is on here as well, centralvalleyscholars.org. It'll be hopefully posted within this week and hopefully along with some other additional resources. But if you have any questions, like Claudia and Angie mentioned, I highly encourage you to ask them now while you have people in front of you. If anyone has any further questions about how to use assist.org or anything like that, also feel free to include those as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quickly, but I can always reshare if there's a slide we want to revisit, but I want to get the link to our upcoming webinars for people to register. And then
somebody asked. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say that same question is someone asked, what was the hardest thing about transitioning to UCB? And I think both of you can answer this one.
Do you want to go first, Angie?
So I think for me, I think the hardest thing about transferring to Berkeley was realizing my own reality. I'm low income, I'm first generation, I'm a woman, and I'm from SoCal. The last one probably doesn't matter to you, but it matters to me. It was definitely a transition. I had never been around, how do I explain this? My community is mainly brown folks. I was never really exposed to white folks. Of course, my community college was very diverse, but it was also, I only went to class and then I went home. Or like to my extracurriculars, and I really only went home. Most of the things that I was involved in had to do with my community, specifically low income first generation students. That was what I got involved in at my community college, realizing that, I mean, I knew that I'm not privileged, but realizing how unprivileged I was definitely a culture shock to me. And that was definitely the hardest. I can't say that being alone was the hardest because I actually didn't go to Berkeley alone. I went with my brother and I also went with my tia. So that, like, finding community wasn't a thing, but we realized how different we were compared to folks who were going to UC Berkeley. And that's kind of like the shortened version.
Yeah, honestly, it's pretty similar to you, Angie. So I'm from San Jose and not that far from UC Berkeley, but even then the culture shock was real. You know, I was going in alone and I was just like, I don't know what to do here. I don't want to say like, okay, I guess I've been privileged enough to go to like schools that were predominantly white. So I was kind of used to that. But then just being in this institution, I was just reminded of like, for so long, they had convinced me like, you don't belong in these spaces because white folks are smarter than you. Like, and I'm not saying that they're not, but I'm just saying that that really stuck to me. And so when I was in lecture hall spaces, I was always like, I didn't want to like raise my hand or participate because I'm like, no, they're actually smarter than me. But it took me time to like really see, I'm like, no, we're all the same, literally. So it took like, it took me a while to like to convince myself of that. As far as like the culture itself, it was just really hard to find even like Mexican food. Like I'm gonna go there right now. Like it's just really hard because like, yes, Berkeley is a very diverse university, but Berkeley itself is not, at least in my personal opinion. So yeah, I also found it to like not really overwhelm myself with a lot of classes. So the best thing that I did my first semester was to take the minimum units required, because yes, you got into UC Berkeley and you want to be an overachiever probably, because that's probably why, like, I don't know, but that was like my best thing that I could have done to myself, because mentally I was able to like get to know the institute. I was able to get to know the institution. Emotionally, I didn't feel that drained, because 13 units is good to work with. So I would also suggest you to do that. Start off pretty slow. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't feel like, oh, I got into UC Berkeley, I have to take 17 units, because you want to like really feel the university and see what it has to offer to you. So that's part of my assimilation to UC Berkeley.
Awesome. Thank you for mentioning that. I don't see any other questions on the Zoom. Let me just double check the Facebook one more time. We've also gotten a lot of engagement on there as well. So thank you to anyone who's viewing. Oh, awesome. So someone just asked, for personal insight questions, how does it help us with UC applications?
Yeah,
And
so
both
part
of
of
y'all-
the UC application is answering personal insight questions. So personal insight questions, you are given the option of 8 questions. You have to answer one if you are a transfer student. And that question is, why did you choose your major and how? And so you have to answer that question, including 3 other questions. Some of the questions include um, what um, what does leadership look like to you, and how have you partaken in it? An obstacle that you have overcame in your life. Um, it could be, there's one that's open-ended, like add anything you haven't already told us. So something interesting that somebody did for that one was they actually wrote a short story. And so that's what they did. Another one is Claudia. Do you remember any of the other ones that they included?
Honestly, you just kind of said the ones that I
Yeah.
personally did. So I don't remember the other ones. The other ones I feel like a little bit more harder, at least personally for me. So yeah, I don't remember. I know that you can look them up now on the UC application website, and see. They don't they tend to like not change, right? Like they're kind of like
Yeah, they're pretty
similar.
much the same throughout. But it's not that they help you with the application, but it's part of the application, at least for UCs. And some privates have personal insight questions. However, they'll be different than the UC application questions.
Yeah, I think when talking to other people from like universities, they've said, well, there and also the transfer center events, they've also emphasized like, yeah, you know, it's not just your grades. We read into those personal questions. So like that can also be a big push into your acceptance into the university that you're applying to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I just want to highlight for everyone too, I sent the link to the official insight questions for this year in the chat. On that website, it lists all of the different insight questions you can choose from. And it also, beneath each question, will give you a sort of synopsis of what the readers of these essays are looking for, or what they're trying to get out of that question. And so you can work with that, and it kind of helps give you a better idea of which ones to pick. What exactly are they getting at with that question? It hopefully, will give you some ideas of what to write and things like that. But yeah, I think what you said was right in terms of like they don't change really. They don't change too much year by year. One thing I also want to mention is the link I sent just a little bit ago that says register for our essay writing pop-up workshop that is happening next Saturday. It'll be in appointments of 30 minutes. So it's sort of a first come, first serve. And we'll talk about that more, on that day to walk people through that process. But you'll be paired with other Central Valley Scholars staff who are going to help you, do some final edits to your essays, make sure that you feel confident when you're submitting them, and just giving any, feedback or as we see fit. And yeah, so that the link will take you directly to the page where you can go register for that. It's another public workshop just like this one is, so I highly encourage you all to, even if you're not applying this year, but you want to start thinking about those essays, maybe you're a junior or something, highly recommend that y'all check out that webinar as well. But so let me double check the Facebook. It looks like we don't have any questions, and it's 5:05, and I want to respect everyone's time. But thank you so much, everyone who's attended. Claudia and Angie, I don't know if either of you have any last words, last advice for our attendees today.
I just quickly want to emphasize that your GPA it's not all about your GPA. It's about who you are too, and to not be too hard on yourself. Let's kick imposter syndrome's butt and get into these institutions, take up these spaces. And again, I can't emphasize this enough, y'all, use up the resources.
Yeah, definitely. So something that I wanted to add was that your path is what you make. And even if it probably doesn't seem like it's going the way that you want, it will. You are your own guide. And so just remember that. Also, don't be afraid to be yourself, as hard as it may be, because I had to learn that very late. In my life, I would like to say, after 26 years, I'm finally living who I am. So also, I just want to remind everyone of that. And yeah, I would say a line, but that's Claudia's line, which is to be what, Claudia?
To be fabulous. Well,
Yeah.
to be smart and fabulous. Okay, because we need both. Okay. So yeah, remind yourself of that. Like I have to tell that little phrase. I'm like going into these institutions, I'm like, this brown girl right here, she's smart and fabulous. And little affirmations like that go a big way. And honestly, like also with your friends, let them know. When you're at universities, try to create study groups. No, okay, you don't even have to wait till universities, like even in community college, begin your networking, because it's gonna take you a long ways. So yeah, build relationships and try to push yourself beyond your own capabilities, even though it's hard, but it's possible.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, that's some great advice from the both of you. And thank you so much for agreeing to co-host this webinar. Oh, yay. Okay, we got a thank you in the Q&A box. Thank you so much for attending. And with that being said, I have taken a screenshot of the attendees. So thank you all for holding out until the end. You'll be entered into our $50 raffle. So check your email sometime soon and you might be the winner. But yeah, thank you all so much and have a good rest of your night. Angie and Claudia, thank you so much for hosting. And yeah, thank you so much for working with us. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.